I decided to use an AM4 motherboard, which limits my choice of components to an AM4 CPU and also a DDR4 RAM. The CPU that I chose is the Ryzen 5 5500. This CPU actually jeopardized the performance of the other components, mainly the SSD and the GPU, because it only supports PCIe Gen 3. The SSD that I have here is a Gen 4 SSD, and the GPU is the RX 6700 XT that supports PCIe Gen 4. Both of them would have performed a lot better if the CPU has PCIe Gen 4 like the Ryzen 5 5600, but for some reason in my region, it costs as much as an AM4 CPU. I'm sorry, an AM5 CPU like the Ryzen 5 7600 or the 7500F. I mean, it is actually not that bad as I test the computer later on. Speaking of expensive component, here's the main culprit, the RAM. This is why I chose the AM4 instead of AM5. This 16GB DDR4 RAM kit costs $100. 3 years ago, that was the price of a 32GB DDR5 RAM kit. Thank you, AI Data Center, very cool. Anyway, let's talk about the actual build process instead of ranting about the ridiculous component prices. The build process actually went pretty smoothly. There was a bit of hurdle for the SSD because I already placed in the manufacturer's own heatsink, so I can't install it alongside the motherboard's SSD heatsink. Well, hopefully it's fine. Afterwards, I plugged in the 8-pin CPU power and the 24 volts motherboard pin from the power supply. After all of that was done, it was time for me to test on whether everything works or not. You can turn on the computer without the case by simply shorting out the power pin of the motherboard, and thankfully everything turns on. The CPU cooler was spinning and the GPU as well. That was the last moment where the build process went smoothly because it went downhill from there. So apparently, whenever a computer gets boot up for the first time, and I don't know about this, there will be a sort of system initialization, and it is a slow process. At the time, I didn't understand what's going on. The motherboard logo didn't show off yet, and I was very impatient. I just wanted to quickly check on the whether the components are working well, install the OS quickly and place it on the case and just be done with it. I decided to flick the power supply for no reason at all and, well, brick the motherboard. I think my thought process at the time was that something went wrong, and I thought that restarting the whole computer would fix something. Everything could have gone smoothly and all according to the plan if only I waited just 1 or 2 more minutes. Thankfully, the fix here is relatively simple. The first thing that I need to do is unplug my power supply from the power source, and for the motherboard, there are pins near the CMOS battery that needs to be shorted, and this process would basically reset the computer as if I have never done that idiotic flick. I have to be honest, I don't understand why that fixed it. It just works. After that mess was solved, I installed the operating system to the SSD. I decided to try Fedora with the KDE Plasma desktop environment. I did this with the sole intention of trying out, just trying it out and eventually replacing it with Windows, but as of now, I don't really have any issues of using Linux. The activities that I do on a computer, which includes browsing the internet, gaming, and sometimes programming, are all working on Linux without any issues. I'll show you later on in the video. The reason I picked Fedora instead of other Linux distro is because I want something that can be installed easily and it just works, I also felt a bit bored with Debian-based distros like Ubuntu, and I don't want to use Arch because I have a light. After the software side of things are all done, I finally installed the motherboard onto the case. By the way, the case installation is a bit harder than I thought. I'm a pretty small person with tiny raccoon finger, and it is still more difficult than I ever anticipated, mainly because the screws are so small and delicate. There are only 2 somewhat major obstacles that happen during the computer case installation. The first one involved the motherboard standoff. The computer case here that I use by default have a pre-installed motherboard standoff made for mini ITX motherboard, which means that for micro ATX motherboard, like the one I use here, you need to install the standoff on the side. I forgot to do that and only realized it when I tried to plug in the 24-volt motherboard pin. Because of that, I have to unscrew everything, install the standoffs, and redo everything. The second one involved the case's very own USB header, which I, forgot to plug in. After all of that, the build process was basically completed. The first thing that I did to test the computer was updating it with the sudo dnf update command for Fedora and installing Steam to play some games. Here is a somewhat modern game, Elden Ring. It runs really nicely. I was expecting that I would get some sort of driver issues related to the GPU, but I didn't get any of that. Here's a somewhat older game that was released 12 years ago, Dark Souls 2. Again, no issues at all. It can even run a PlayStation 4 game. Here's Bloodborne, which was definitely obtained through a very legal process. Just a little disclaimer though. I'm aware that those games are obviously not native to Linux, especially Bloodborne. The game that I tried, even Elden Ring, are not that demanding. I'm pretty sure that the monitor that I use here is also a pretty major bottleneck, considering that it is a 1080p monitor with a 60Hz refresh rate. The point is, I can't say for sure how well the performance would compare against Windows. I also tested some local LLM with Llama CPP. The LLM that I tried here is a pretty new model from Google called Gemma 4 QAT with 12 billion parameters. I thought it would perform terribly, knowing that this is not an NVIDIA GPU, but it actually ran pretty great as well. Well, at least for my own personal case. I actually have a gaming laptop that I still use even for the creation of this video. It has a Ryzen 7 4800HS CPU and a GTX 1650 GPU. It is 5 years old now. Ironically, just like any other gaming laptop, this is terrible for gaming. It would heat up so badly that it would even reach an uncomfortable 80 degrees Celsius to 90 degrees Celsius actually most of the time. Around 190 degrees Fahrenheit in Freedom Matrix. It can run the games that I mentioned earlier, albeit with lower graphical settings, especially for Elden Ring, but I also have to limit the frame rate to 40 or else it would reach the temperature. I want this laptop to last for a very long time because I really like it. And that's basically the purpose of this new computer that I built, to run those very demanding software while also being upgradable in the future. That's it for me. Thank you for watching.